Hi, I'm Dr. Melissa, and this is Empathy in Action. Empathy is a really hot ticket now, and my DMs are filled with people asking me questions every day. So this is my opportunity to connect with my people one-on-one. And for you to ask how you use empathy in daily life, in leadership, and out in the world. Using empathy is now more important than ever. So let's talk. Hello, and welcome back to The Empathic Leader. I'm so glad to have you here. So happy to have you join us because we're actually finishing up part 3 of a 3-part series on your empathy toolkit. So I'm excited to have you here with me tonight while we wrap all this up. Because what do you do if either you aren't using empathy as effectively as you would like to, or you would like to be able to guide someone else to use it better? Like I talk about in my book, sometimes the best managers are the ones that can manage up. And that might be for parents, that might be for leaders, that might be for anybody that sees themselves as a leader, but maybe could use a little help with this. So let's dig in. I want to start with just quickly going over what we talked about the last couple of weeks, because we started out with I see you. That's the first tool in your kit, right? When you're actually talking to somebody and you're able to say, I see you, that I see where you are. Now, the piece that I didn't give you is that what this actually means is that's your ticket to self-awareness. Meryl from New Jersey, great to see you, my friend. So when you're actually saying, I see you, you're actually understanding your own self-awareness of the situation and being able to take the other person's perspective and get out of your own way. We're going to talk a little more about self-awareness at the end of this, because this is one of those skills that people, sometimes they really do have it, and sometimes they think they do and they don't. But we'll get there in a little bit. So first tool, I see you. Taking the perspective of the other person through their point of view, not your point of view, right? Being selfless and not selfish. The second tool that we talked about were the words, help me understand. So if the first one is self-awareness, the second one helps you fill in the gaps you can't be aware of. Help me understand your point of view. Jackie, it's great to see you. And it's as simple as asking. And this is the part with empathy that we tend to forget. We're so busy trying to just automatically feel and understand things that sometimes people forget that sometimes they can just say, help me understand. I want to know where you're at. I want to understand your situation. The third tool, and the one we're talking about tonight, is name their outcome. And this is where you take empathy as something that's passive and make it active, right? Because empathy is static. You don't do anything. Compassion is where things become active. So think of it this way. We all have drivers, right? We all have things that we're either trying to move to or move away from. Things that drive us into action or inaction. And that's what name their outcome helps to pinpoint. So think about it, right? You're at work. You're doing your job, whether you're working from home or you're working in an office building, you're an employee, whatever it is, right? You have this job, and on the surface, it's, I have this job because I need to make money, probably, or I need this job because I have to have benefits. Usually it's one of the two. But what are the actual drivers? Usually we're dealing with emotions that are much more primitive, like fear, right? I need to make this money so I don't lose my house. I need to do well at work so that people don't find out that I'm an imposter syndrome. That pops up a lot. And those are negative drivers. There's positive drivers too, like I want to be appreciated and recognized. Or I want to leave some kind of legacy for my kids, for my family in this company. You think of some of the big CEOs like Steve Jobs or some of the people that were really pushing towards a legacy. So we all have these drivers, always. But when you can name what these drivers are, then you know what the outcome is someone is actually pushing towards. So think about it. We started this episode by talking about managing up. Now think about it in terms of, we're just going to put you at work just because. And think of it in terms of your leader. Can you name their outcome? Because if you ask them, are they actually there for the glory and honor of their organization? Or are they really there because they're being driven by something else? Are they there because they have imposter syndrome? So the outcome that they're looking for is actually not to be found out in their own mind, not in real life, in their own mind, right? Is their biggest driver financial security? I'm going to drive people so that we can get the big bonuses or the big money that we've got going on so that I can bring in that money. Is it legacy? A lot of people want to be able to be remembered in a certain way. They don't want to feel like they are falling out of memory. Yeah, Josette, good to see you, by the way. So what are the underlying drivers that are going on? Once you can name those drivers, you know what the outcome is that person wants. And now you're really able to understand their perspective, because you're not just understanding their perspective in the moment as a static thing, what's happening right now. You're understanding their perspective actively, where they're trying to go, why they're trying to get there, what's the underlying reason. And that's why this third tool is so important. Because when you can name their outcome, what you're actually doing is taking that final step from self-awareness, I see you, I am aware, to perspective taking, help me understand the parts I don't see, to taking action, naming their outcome. What is driving you? What makes you tick? And that's why these three work together. That's how that works. So let's put all these tools in one basket, all right? And talk about it in terms of self-empathy, being able to have empathy for yourself, all right? Because the first one is, I see you. When is the last time you took time to actually step back and observe and see yourself? When life is crazy and everything is going bananas and we have responsibilities and we have kids and we have spouses and we have jobs and we have life and we have, think about it. When is the last time? And we have the coolest kids in town in this audience. So you guys may have taken the time to actually do this, but other people who are listening may not. When is the last time you actually took the time to observe and say, yeah, I see myself. I see myself for where I really am and what I'm really doing, right? The next step is help me understand. Now, if you remember, the first step to self-empathy is self-observation. I see you. The second step to self-empathy is self-reflection. Help me understand. You're going to take the time to reflect on what you've been doing or why you've been doing it or how you've been doing it to understand yourself better. Hello, Leslie Flowers. It's good to see you. So see how these also fold into self-empathy? Having empathy, having self-empathy, the two go in tandem. If you really want to have one, you have to have both. The third step of self-empathy is self-awareness. We've already talked about how that folds in. The fourth step is self-compassion. name their outcome. What is your outcome? For real. Not, I'm going to take care of these kids because I have to, but because I want to see the real outcome. I want them to grow up to be adults in society that have empathy, that are smart, that can take care of themselves. What is your real drivers? And you may have to take a step back and write some of this down and journal a little bit and think about it. But it's the same steps. So if you remember those 3 empathy tools, I see you, help me understand, and name their outcome. And by they, it may be name your outcome. But that's what's going to make sense of all of this and how you can actually start to develop this empathy in other people. Now, I said we were going to hit self-awareness because it's a big deal. I think I mentioned a couple of weeks ago, I was talking about the Dunning-Kruger effect. And for those of you who don't know, the simplest way to describe it is that the less people know, the more people think they know because their worldview is much smaller, right? Whereas the more people know, the less they think they know because their worldview is so much wider. That goes along with self-awareness, self-reflection, understanding just how big and wide things are. We actually see this in researchers a lot, where you'll have the armchair researchers on Reddit that are absolutely certain about their outcomes and what they believe and what they think. And it's because their worldview, they haven't seen all the research that's out there. They haven't looked at all the publications that are out there. They haven't taken the time to really pull in the whole world. Because the more of this information you pull in, the more you don't know. It's really what it comes down to. So that's the Dunning-Kruger effect. And self-awareness is the same way. The people who think they have the most are usually the ones that have the least because they have a small worldview. Self-awareness in a nutshell is your ability to take a look at the world around you and see your impact. What is my effect on the people around me? I'm aware of how myself, fits into this world. So when people are missing self-awareness, that's when they don't really see what's going on. Whereas the more self-awareness someone has, the more they see how these ripples go out and out and out, and how they affect the rest of the world. Now, in all my research on empathy, I wanted to see what other people are saying about how do you train self-awareness? How do you train emotional intelligence? How have people done this? And the one that really seems to have stuck, as far as the literature is concerned, is a 4-step process. All right? And I lost it already. Can you believe that? Oh, it's going to be one of those nights, is it? I thought I just had it. All right. Yes, there it is. Okay. I'm so glad you guys are patient. Thank you for taking your time with me while I get my own brain sorted out here. The first step is reflection. And here we are again. We're back to reflection, self-reflection, understanding, taking the time to think about it. So once again, self-reflection, you have to understand what impact you're having on the world. The second step is feedback. And I thought that was really interesting because what it's saying is you have to have somebody else kind of giving you insight on what's going on. And when I talk about empathy and I talk about feedback, I talk about how you need to have an honest view. You have to have someone who's going to give you good feedback. Yes, Leslie, that's why teenagers believe they know it all, because they don't have the life experience yet to understand just how big and bad and wide the world is. Sometimes I don't think we know either. I think it's too big and bad and wide. But that feedback of some kind, I tell people that if they don't have time or they don't have a person they can really trust, you can journal and go back and read it. And taking it with a grain of salt always, you can throw it into AI. But keep in mind that AI is a product and not a person. So it's made to make you keep coming back, which means, it's going to try to tell you what it thinks you want to hear. So, yes, Jackie, we do always need to support each other on these lives. I mean, if we don't support each other, who's going to do it? and it makes life pretty lonely. So second one is feedback. Third, mindfulness. Actually taking that feedback and integrating it. This is how I am, having this impact. Well, today I came home from work and I was in a bad mood because my boss yelled at me, so I yelled at my wife or my husband. Well, what was the impact? Well, then I saw my partner go and take it out on the kids or the cat or the dog or whatever. These ripples go out. They go out beyond us. So being really mindful to be able to see what's happening. And then the fourth step, and I actually thought this was interesting. And for those of us in the coaching side of things, it actually bodes well because the fourth step is coaching, according to these researchers. It's a researcher named London. They actually said you're best to get coaching, to get someone who can help you through whatever it is you're trying to do to learn self-awareness. And this applies to all the emotional intelligence skills and empathy and anything that you would consider soft, which I just don't like that name. But yeah, so self-awareness, that's how you would learn it. So for anybody out there, if there's any self-awareness coaches out there, maybe today is your time. Maybe this is something that, we should be thinking about. All right, ladies and gentlemen and cats and dogs and everybody else, if you have made it this far, please like, subscribe, and comment. And check me out on Spotify and on Apple and on YouTube. We're at 296 subscribers. And it would really warm my heart if we could get to 300. So if there's 4 of you out there who would like to subscribe, that would be amazing. It's at The Empathic Leader at YouTube. Hello, Jason. It's good to see you. So let's dig into a few questions here. Because last week, Leslie asked if we were born with sociopathy, which is a great question because we were talking about, being born with other traits and that sort of thing. So sociopathy being part of the dark triad, which is sociopathy, psychopathy, Machiavellianism, and narcissism. Okay, so sociopathy and psychopathy are kind of lumped together. And here's why. Because you're born with psychopathy, but you live sociopathy. So here's the difference. Psychopaths are actually born missing something. It's not that they have psychopathy. It's that they're missing empathy, which makes them psychopaths. Like the areas of the brain that in a normal person light up when they see really horrible, grisly photos or really sad things, they just don't light up in the brain of a psychopath. It's not there. Sociopaths are made. Usually they have incredibly traumatic childhoods of some kind. Think of some of these really war-ravaged countries or like inner city things where you're dealing with lots of bullets and riots and just really ugly things. Sociopaths are made. Psychopaths are born. When you think of sociopaths, though, usually they're the ones. So it's weird. They put psychopaths and sociopaths in the same bucket because it kind of ends up the same, but they're really not the same at all. Because like psychopaths, because they just miss the thing in the rest of us that stimulates us emotionally, they're super cool. They're usually very calm. They're usually above average in smarts. They're the ones that are going to be methodical and work things out. Sociopaths are the ones that will trip off and kill an entire room full of people. They lack any kind of emotional regulation. They really don't care about rules or society. And they're the ones that really end up in jail. If you think of it this way, a sociopath is going to end up in jail for a violent crime. A psychopath is going to end up in jail for a paper crime, like fleecing an entire company. So that's the difference. And it's not so much that they're born with these things, it's that they're born without empathy. So either they're born without empathy or it gets beaten out of them. It's one or the other. That was a really good question, though, and I wanted to make sure that came up. Leslie has a question. She said, the subject of self-awareness is sorely missed in coaching programs and conventional training. Would you agree? Yes, I would. Because I think without that, you can't really get into any of the other training. I think you have to have self-awareness. That's part of it. And when you start getting into leadership theory, like you talk about servant leadership or authentic leadership or transformative leadership, self-awareness is usually part of these things. And I bring up leadership, but when I do, I don't want it to be like, oh, that means the leader of a Fortune 500 company. No, we are all leaders. Even if you're just a leader of yourself, you're a leader. So when I'm talking about leaders, I'm talking to you and me and everybody else. So, just to be aware of that. Yeah, I do think it's missing. And I think we could really use it. In other countries, they do teach it as part of social emotional learning. We just don't do it here so much. So I've been answering some of the questions that we've been getting. But I've gotten more than a couple, some that are kind of negative, but they're questions and they should probably be answered too. So these are off my YouTube channel. And I wanted to bring them up just to show the other side of how people are thinking about empathy or not thinking about empathy. So here's the first one. I actually didn't want to, but, they have a voice as well. So, by definition, isn't shame an internal process whereby you question your actions against your internal morality? So shame is both good and bad. With shame, we are limited, but without shame, we would be psychopaths. So that's the question. What they're saying is shame is useful, that we need to have it to keep us in line. To which I would say no, because shame isn't an internal process. If it were an internal process, we'd be born with it, but we're not. If it were an internal process, then dark triad people would have it, and they don't. Shame is something we're taught by society, by our parents, by the media, by the stuff that's out there as a means to keep us in line. And as we know, not everything society teaches is good. So that's why we have problems with shame, because maybe we're carrying an extra 10 or 20 or 30 pounds. Or we have shame because we're 50 or 60 years old and aren't going to be able to get into the job market like some younger people. So shame isn't an internal process necessarily, and it's not necessary. That's why I talk about being critical, because you want to be critical. You want to look at what you've done. You want to think about how to do it better. You want to be able to put things together and create a better version of you, but you don't need to have emotions attached like shame, because it's not productive. Shame is what keeps us in line, and it doesn't actually have anything to do with morality. So, yeah. Oh, yes. Leslie says an excellent book is The Sociopath Next Door. That's a very good book, actually, because there are people who are sociopaths and psychopaths who do work their way into society, and usually as they get a little bit older and they start to realize that they're different, it can be a real learning process for them. So yeah, that's a very, very good book. So yeah, no, shame isn't necessary in this. I put shame in the same thing with judgment. Shame and empathy can't really exist in the same place either. So yeah, that's my answer to that question. Shame just creates a negative loop. And the second you have shame, you're judging yourself against a bar that you're probably never going to hit. And that's why I use the word critical. So there it is. The other question I wanted to bring up to the cool kids. Yeah. Yes, Chasen says, I really agree with that person's statement. Shame isn't productive or useful. It's limiting. Yes, I agree. But I also think it's good to know and understand what other people are saying and thinking, which is why I'm bringing these questions to you guys. Because with empathy, we are trying to understand the perspective of the other person. And like we've said, that doesn't mean you have to like it. That doesn't mean you have to agree with it. That doesn't mean you have to go along with it. It just means that you're kind of looking to understand. This second one took me a minute to try and reach into that, trying to be critical, not caring about it. Nobody was here when they saw my head explode. So here it is. There is no such thing as effective empathy. Where is the evidence? To think you know how someone else feels is an arrogant assumption. It is also a cognitive distortion. Yes, someone put that in writing. Number one, yes, there is such a thing as effective empathy. We have research going back into the 30s talking about emotional empathy because that's where empathy really started. And no, you're not going to be able to assign numbers to it quantitatively. You can do empathy assessments and get numbers associated with it. You can go ahead and assign scales. You can't pull out an empathy and dissect it. So it's one of those things that you understand through observation, first of all. But yeah, it exists. It's in the literature. It's there going way, 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 way back. And just on a personal level, yeah, Chasen says, wow, yeah, you should have seen my head explode on that one. Just on a personal level, we've seen it. And if you haven't seen it and you aren't understanding someone else's emotion, because that's what effective empathy is, it's emotional empathy, then that's where I would start wondering about the psychopath side of things. And I'm not saying that to label anything or anybody. What I'm saying is that's part of being a psychopath, is that you have a limited ability to feel. That's part of it. That's why you see some of these psychopaths that are serial killers that will ramp up what it takes for them to accommodate themselves sexually, because they don't have the ability to feel emotion the way the rest of us do. It's part of what it is. And remember, it's not a disorder, it's a personality type. So there's the first half of that. There's no such thing as effective empathy. Where is the evidence? The evidence is in almost 100 years of research. Medical research, qualitative research, quantitative research, neurological research, primatology. We talked about that with the animal ones. Here's the rest of it. To think you know how someone else feels is an arrogant assumption. No, because you don't know what someone else feels, but you're trying. Remember, we said it's not about the act, it's about the intent. I want to understand you. I want to see who you are. I want to be able to be in empathy with you. You're right. I'm not going to understand the intricacies of what someone else is feeling, but I want to understand. It's in the intent, not in the action. The last sentence says, it is also a cognitive distortion. And I honestly don't know what that means. So I can't actually answer that part. Yeah, I don't know what to say to that. But I would be careful of, that kind of sounds like pseudoscientific rhetoric to me. And you got to be careful of that, because people will say things and make it sound very researched and scientific, but it's not. So one thing we should know about theories, any theory, I don't care if we're talking empathy or string theory or relativity or whatever, is that theories can never be verified. They can only be falsified. And this comes from Karl Popper, who is a scientific philosopher. So he philosophized about science, and he was like in the 30s, like 1934 or so. But theories can never be verified, only falsified, which is also saying that in science and with research, you never say, this is proven, this is what it is. You say, this is what we think it is right now, until something else comes along that disproves it. The other thing he said that you might recognize is that no number of white swans can prove all swans are white, but a single black swan disproves it, which what he's saying is, none of these theories are proven. We have to be open to the idea that, there may be other things out there, and that none of these theories are in stone ever. All right, last question. I just have too much of my own emotional load. Why should I take on everybody else's when I can still be charitable and compassionate? But maybe that just me be a man, and empathy is more a female response. Remember a couple weeks ago, I talked about this idea that, empathy is a female thing, and a couple people in the audience were like, nobody thinks that. Yeah, people think that. You'd be surprised. So, first of all, we did talk about how you can choose empathy, and it is part of a cognitive load. That's real. That's true. But why should you do it? Why can't you just be charitable and compassionate? Because if you don't lead with empathy, you could end up with misplaced compassion. And we kind of talked about that a little bit, about how, back in the 80s and stuff, as a country, we were trying to give money and give food and be compassionate to a lot of countries, especially in Africa, that were having trouble with that. But that in the end, that compassion fell flat. And the people who needed it didn't get the food, didn't get the resources, because we didn't lead with empathy. We didn't understand their perspective, and that other people were going to come in and take that money and take that food for their own power. If you don't lead with empathy, you run the risk of misplaced compassion, which can do more damage than if you had just not done anything at all. It's good to be charitable and compassionate, but do you want to actually do more damage in the process? And the second part about maybe that's just me because I'm a man and empathy is a female response. No, male and female babies respond the same way. Toddlers respond the same way. It's got nothing to do with gender. As men and women, we tend to be socialized differently. Remember, we said that shame is something put onto us from society. Well, so is this idea that empathy is male or female or not. We're socialized that way, which means we have a choice on whether we want to buy into that or not. So that's not, no. So anyway, all right, my friends. So tonight is episode 12, which means it's the end of the season for us. So I'm going to be gone for a few weeks because I'm going to be traveling and I'm going to be playing and I'm going to be finishing up my dissertation, which means when I come back, I will have my second doctor. So I'll lead in with that song by the Thompson Twins about Doctor or something, although YouTube would probably pull it. But please, I saw Jackie signed up on YouTube and I appreciate it, which means we need 3 more subscribers, which would be fantastic. I know it's not a lot, but for me, I'm excited that 300 people want to know about empathy. So yeah, that's how I feel about it. So since we are at the end of the season and I won't see you for the next couple weeks, let me leave you with this. Don't leave this to somebody else. You have to be the change you want to see in the world, which means you need to lead with empathy. You need to show people the empathy that you want, because otherwise they may not know. And that does mean putting yourself out there, being vulnerable. But like we've said, we have 7 to 9 opportunities for empathy every single day, which means you can start with self-empathy. You can start with empathy for another. And that doesn't mean you have to like them. It doesn't mean you have to agree with them. It doesn't mean you have to do what they do. It just means that you're taking their perspective. So I am challenging you, each and every one of you, before I come back next season, to start to put this into play, right? Because practice does not make perfect. Practice makes permanent. Be the change you want to see in the world. Don't leave it to somebody else. Lead by example. In the meantime, I will be putting up pre-recorded episodes on my YouTube channel. So if you just can't get enough, you can still find me there. And remember, because we are dealing with both affective, emotional empathy, which, yes, is a real thing, and cognitive empathy, when you do go out there into the world to lead with your heart and your empathy, remember to always keep a cool head and a warm heart. Bye for now. Want to know more? Connect with me here on LinkedIn. Or follow this QR code to my website, where you can find my newsletter, my blog, my talks, and all things emotional intelligence and empathy.